Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Amari's Revenge. The goddess next door is confronted by a Nubian queen out for revenge at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in this inaugural Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Amari's Revenge in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Better get the cool slow, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. Okay, this video is going to be a bit of a rant, but it's something I need to say to get off my chest. Now, legendary comic book writer Mark Waid is pondering retiring because Donald Trump won the 2024 election, and according to Mark Waid, he says he can no longer work on comic books because he doesn't believe in the basic goodness of his fellow Americans anymore, and without this goodness, he can't write superheroes. Now, as a black man who's been running a publishing company and aspiring to be a comic book writer ever since I was about 16 years old, I look at Mark Waid and I just see a spoiled brat who is so caught up in his white privilege that he doesn't see how ridiculous he looks. Now, this entire tantrum being thrown by Mark Waid doesn't show me a man of character. No, it just basically shows me a bitch-made dude who is just so caught up in his feelings because people went out here and voted for Donald Trump that he wants to go out here and take his ball and walk away from the comic book industry, and that really shows me that he is no sort of man of character at all. No, when I look at Mark Waid, he definitely fits that pattern and profile for beta males that I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis, and he looks like a man basically throwing a hissy fit, all because his candidate wound up losing the 2024 presidential election. And when I sit there and listen to him go into this statement talking about how he doesn't believe in the goodness of his fellow Americans anymore, and this is without this he cannot write comics, well, I hate to break it to Mark Waid, because as a heterosexual black man, I'm going to tell Mark here that when it comes to your fellow Americans weren't really good like he imagines them to be in the rose-colored reality that he created to make his smooth world. No, when it comes to your fellow Americans, they basically were never good from the founding of this country. No, like my fellow contemporary, Your World, Mr. Superboy used to say, America was founded by thieves, slaves, and opportunists, so they never had any of that basic goodness like you thought. I mean, here was a country founded by people who thought that it was okay to call a black man like myself 3/5 of a person, and you're talking about you don't believe in their basic goodness? Well, I never saw their basic goodness as a heterosexual black man. So when I listen to Mark Waid, I just see another one of these beta white males who's so caught up in his white privilege and takes his life so for granted that he doesn't appreciate all of the opportunities given to him to work in this comic book industry for the last 30 years. And what's really sad is that I used to look up to Mark Waid and see him as one of the legendary comic book writers like the late great Mark Grunwald and the late great Dwayne McDuffie, but when I look at Mark Waid right now, I don't see a man of character who has any of the values and traits of those superheroes that he used to write in legendary comics like his 1990s Flash run that he did that really redefined Wally West in stories like The Return of Barry Allen, nor do I see the man of character that went out here and promoted those values in Return of Barry Allen, where he showed Wally West having the resolve to see his hero Barry Allen basically turn out to be a villain in that legendary Flash issue, which is called The Most Tragic Day in the Life of Wally West. No, I don't see any of that character of Wally in Mark Waid, where while he persevered and continued to go on, and eventually in Flash 79 managed to beat Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash, who had ran back in time, and managed to defeat him and define himself as the Flash of the 1990s. No, I don't see any of that character that he put into that story, Return of Barry Allen, which I consider to be one of my favorite Flash stories, nor do I see any of the character of the legendary story Kingdom Come that Mark Waid wound up writing. Again, Kingdom Come is considered to be one of the greatest stories as related to comic book superheroes, but I don't see any of that kind of character with Mark Waid. No, sadly, this privileged white male is going to go out here and get so caught up in his feelings regarding politics on social media that what he's going to do is talk about considering retirement, all because his presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, wound up losing the election, and wound up losing the election not because of the basic goodness of your fellow Americans, but because Kamala Harris did not go out here and run a solid campaign at all. No, and Kamala Harris basically went out here, spent $1 billion, and did not define any sort of platform or any sort of agenda or any sort of vision for the country. And Mark Waid is one of those guys who thinks we're supposed to support Kamala Harris based on feelings. Well, I hate to break it to Mark Waid, but in the real world that I have been living in for the last 51 years, in that real world, if you are in business, you need to have a platform and you need to have a vision for where you want to go. You need to have a direction where you want to go. You just cannot go out here and run on things like Kamala Harris ran on, like joy and talking about feelings, or expect people to go out here and vote for you based on feelings. No, you have to have a plan. And as much as I don't like Donald Trump, and I'm no Donald Trump fan, but the whole thing is I understand that people voted for Donald Trump because Joe Biden in and of himself basically ran the country straight into the ground. And after winding up in that disastrous debate, he wound up again showing most of the country he was not somebody who was viable as a candidate, and Joe Biden wound up stepping aside. Kamala Harris took over, and Kamala Harris in and of herself is just a known incompetent and who couldn't even run the vice president's office. So what were people supposed to vote for? Critical question I've got to ask Mark Waid regarding the entire 2024 election. Again, he's sitting there talking about he doesn't believe in the basic goodness of his fellow Americans. Again, I go back to the statement that my contemporary, Your World, Mr. Superboy, used to make, that America was founded by thieves, slaves, and opportunists. And this country, being founded by thieves and opportunists, never had any sort of basic goodness as related to things, and never had it at all as related to even honoring its own Constitution. So you're sitting there talking about you don't believe in the basic goodness of your fellow Americans. Well, as again, a black man, I have never seen the basic goodness of fellow Americans as related to the overall state of this union. And again, that's because this country was founded on an institution of white supremacy, a system of white supremacy where Mark Waid got a lot of his white privilege and got that white privilege to be able to be blessed to go out here and write comics for 30 years, able to write comics for 30 years, and be able to live and have a career that this guy who was living in a ghetto a long time ago in a ghetto far away would love to have had that opportunity. But this guy says, oh, he can't write comics anymore. Well, Sean, who is a publisher who's been publishing his own material for the last 15 years, because this comic book industry, which welcomes Mark Waid but wouldn't open a door for me, I have to say, as a professional, don't let the door hit Mark Waid in the ass, because nobody cares at this point about him being so upset about Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump basically makes you that upset, then the comic book industry would be better off without him. That's what I would have to say to Mark Waid if I was a publisher. I mean, if I was running DC right now and I heard that statement, I'm making a call to Mark Waid and letting him know, hey, we don't really need you anymore if we have a contract basically we're going to try to either run that contract out if we have to, or I'm going to be telling my lawyers to go look for a statement of breach of contract and basically end this contract, because there are so many talents out there that I've seen from the indies who would love to have an opportunity to work with these legendary characters like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. And from what I've seen from many of these young talents out here, I would be getting on the phone with some of those talents, or going to their Facebook or their other social media and making a call to one of those talents and letting them have Mark Waid's job, and letting them have that opportunity that he had back in the 1990s when he was working on books like Legend of the Shield, working for Impact, working on The Flash. I would be giving those rookies that opportunity, and moving on from Mark Waid. That's what I would be doing if I was the DC editor, because as these opportunities, again, are something that he doesn't appreciate. And I know one of these young talents that I've seen from many of these great books that I've been reading and doing reviews on, like Savage Sin, Bobby Joe, Legend of the Gorgon. I mean, all these books I have been reviewing, and I definitely know that I want to go out here and call Corey Hardiman. I know he would love to have that job. I mean, these are guys who I know would basically be ready to get that opportunity. I know also I would love to call Bill Walko. He would be loving to have like one of these jobs. I mean, these guys would love to have the job that Mark Waid has. And he's sitting up here talking about, oh, I want to retire because Trump won the election. Well, I hate to break it to Mark Waid once again. Well, life goes on when your candidate doesn't win, and life goes on in this world, and we all got to go out here and make a living. That's what my father had to do when Ronald Reagan won the election in 1980. That's what my father had to do in 1984, and it's what he had to do in 1988 when George Bush won. Same thing in 1992 when Bill Clinton won. And when George W. Bush won, my family still had to go on. And people are going to have to go on with Donald Trump winning. That's just part of life. But sadly, people like Mark Waid can't deal with the reality of life, because they live in what I call in the man crisis, a rose-colored reality. And they live in this rose-colored reality where they basically think, oh, since the world doesn't go their way, they want to go out here and participate in this temper tantrum, or this what some people call a disorder called Trump derangement syndrome, and participate in this tantrum, all to their detriment. Here's a man who wants to go out here and piss away a 30-year career, all because his candidate didn't win. And that this is something I can say, okay, you want to go? Then you can be gone, because life's going to go on. Life's going to go on, and life is just going to be continuing on, and people are going to continue on with or without you. And I guarantee if I go out here and I was working at DC and I fired this dude, nobody would be upset at all. They would just basically be saying, thank you for doing this, because this is what a professional does in the business. Now, a professional is all about making sure that the product is of quality, and making sure that the people producing the product are focused on making the best product at all. And it's clear to me that Mark Waid is not interested in focusing on making the product the best at all. No, what's happened with Mark Waid as a writer is he's gotten so caught up in all of social media and all of the reactions and attention he's receiving on social media that he can't focus on his job. And he can't focus on his job because all he's thinking about is his left-leaning position and the fact that people disagree with him. Well, I hate to break it to Mark once more, but when it comes to life on social media, you're going to run into people who disagree with you. I mean, I ran into people who disagreed with me before social media. I remember the days of the Wizard World message boards. People used to disagree all the time. People used to disagree on the Wizard World boards, the superhero hype boards, and they even disagreed on the Fwoosh when Dan Didio basically destroyed the entire DC universe to give us this craptacular New 52 and the craptacular dysfunctional state that DC Comics is currently in. People disagreed on those message boards, and they managed to move on with their lives, and they managed to go on and continue doing their jobs, and they continued to have money to go out here and buy action figures like the Marvel Legends I have here right now, or action figures like I have here in the back, like this Black Wally West Flash that I bought from the DC Multiverse line. Again, people have time to go out here and spend their money and do their job, and that's what I had to do. And basically, that's what I had to do, because if you want to live in this world, you're going to have to live with different things, like understanding life isn't fair. Your fellow Americans, they are who they are, because, again, most humans are born in sin, and your fellow Americans, they basically are doing what they can. Were you sitting there talking about the basic goodness of your fellow Americans? Well, you're basically, when it comes to your fellow Americans, they have a right to vote for who they want to. That's all part of our U.S. Constitution. That's all part of our U.S. Constitution, in that it says we the people, and it says that the people have a choice in our constitutional republic, and that's where Mark Waid got it twisted. It's a democracy. No, it's not a democracy. It's a constitutional republic, and people choose who they want to represent them. And when it came to Joe Biden, he basically wasn't representing we the people. He was representing all of these crazy far-left ideas that weren't really good for the country. No, he wasn't really working for things as related to the people, and people were sitting here, they were dealing with high prices, they were dealing with struggling to make ends meet, and many people didn't even have the money to afford comic books anymore, and many people didn't want to read comics, and many people still don't want to read comics, because you have people like Mark Waid, who basically, a lot of people want to say he's mentally ill, but I am, as someone who has, again, studied psychology and studied mental health, I don't see Mark Waid as mentally ill. I just see him as bitch-made, and I see him as a bitch-made dude who basically has been coddled and enabled, like many of the black males like Pookie and Ray Ray in my neighborhood, who basically were coddled by their single moms, and as they were coddled by their single moms, they were allowed to go out here and participate in violating people's boundaries, disrespecting people, and given a pass to do this, similar to what happens with many of these white guys like Mark Waid, who go out here and have white privilege that they basically take for granted. This is what Mark Waid has, as he sits there talking about he wants to retire due to the re-election of Donald Trump. And when I hear that, it makes my blood boil. It makes my blood boil, because here's a man who has been blessed to have a good job in comics for over 30 years, have the ability to basically walk into any of these editorial departments, go out here and make a pitch, and they'll greenlight that series. Here's a man with tremendous influence, and he's sitting there talking about, oh, he wants to retire because of an election. Well, as a guy who has been out of work for 15 years and has been basically blocked from being able to work a basic job in fast food due to the feminist HR brick wall, and being denied to work in any of job for the last 15 years, this makes my blood boil, because this man doesn't understand how blessed he is to even have a job in this economy, in an industry that basically is shrinking and contracting every day. I mean, if this man had to live like I had to do for the periods of long-term unemployment that I've had, from periods like when I first came out of college from 94 to 96, to a period after I lost a job in a supermarket from 97 to 2000, and a period of unemployment from 2002 to 2008, where I was basically living on $60 a month a relative had to give me. I mean, if you had to live rough like that, and you get a good job like being able to write comics, and a dream job at that for me, to be able to write comics, you would basically be thanking God for the job that you had, and basically be out here thanking God for what He has blessed you with. That's what I would be doing, just thanking God for and appreciating the opportunity to be able to not only be able to work in my dream job, but to work with characters that people like my brother basically bought for years at the newsstand. I mean, my brother is a huge comic fan and has been buying these comics and action figures for years. And he's basically been buying these figures in doubles and triples for DC Universe Classics and Marvel Legends. And I mean, if he was to hear that I had gotten a job in comics, I guarantee you he would have been ecstatic to see me have that job and be able to go to the places like New York Comic Con and be able to go out here and work and talk to the fans and have a relationship with the fans and go out here and really enjoy this opportunity. That's what I would be doing if I were able to get that kind of job that Mark Waid has. And instead of getting upset about a guy as related to politics, I would be out here again doing live streams, giving out free comics, going out here giving out free autographed comics, going out here doing live streams and talking about comics, talking about the craft of comics. I mean, I would be out here again selling these comics and telling people, oh, it's Wednesday, you guys got to go out to the comic shop, you guys got to go pick up this new book that I'm doing, whether it be Wonder Woman or Batman or even a D or X-list character as the Heckler. I would be out here, going out here selling these comics because I understand as a publisher that this is a business, and it's a business with a low margin of profit, and 90% of books fail. That's what I know from my 15 years of working at SJS Direct and building SJS Direct. That's what I know as somebody who's basically been struggling to build a business against a tidal wave of resistance and has been dealing with about the last year of really terrible sales. I mean, the last month I only made $10 in book sales, and when I look at Mark Waid sitting up there talking about he want to retire due to the re-election of Donald Trump, all while he's working on most of DC's A-list characters on books like the Superman and Batman World's Finest book, while he's working on books like Justice League Unlimited, working with DC's A-list characters, having an opportunity to again be able to work in this business for over 30 years when I couldn't even get in the door with the comic book business, and I have been looking for a door since the mid-1990s and been showing people my work ever since about 2009, and people in this business know who I am. They've known who I am for the last, I'd say, about 10 or 11 years. I mean, people know me from my blog, Sean James Black Freelance Writer. Many comic pros know who I am behind the scenes. They don't want to say that they know who I am. They know about my work on the ISIS series. They know about my work on the Esteem series. They know about my work on the John Haynes series of books that I've written. They know about the comics I have produced, like the Esteem No Good Deed comic. They know about my comic John Haynes at Death's Door, where people are basically saying this is one of the best comics out there. It's extremely well written. I mean, I have been out here for all of these years, and people won't even open a door for me, won't even give me an opportunity to come in outside of Dynamite, which asked me for an inquiry, and then I never heard back from them. And Dynamite's comics quality has basically just dropped like a rock, but they have no time to talk to me, and I'm a solid writer. And you've got a guy like Mark Waid sitting up here talking about he want to retire because of Donald Trump. You got a dude sitting up here talking about he want to retire because his candidate didn't win an election. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here, again, people don't want to give me the opportunity to go out here and show what I can do, even though I have shown what I can do. And this is a sad state of affairs of the comic book industry. This guy, again, shows his white privilege as related to things. He shows how much white privilege he has because he want to leave a job, and I haven't had a job in years. This heterosexual black man who is forced to work for himself is sitting here and you don't want to talk to him at all. None of these editors want to talk to me. even though I've shown consummate professionalism and shown ability to go out here and produce on a regular basis. I mean, here's a guy who wrote over 80 books, wrote in 3 series, and was able to get 3 series out every year. But these companies basically want to sit here and get upset about Mark Waid. No, if Mark Waid was working for SJS Direct and he pulled a stunt like punching a wall like he did at CrossGen, that would be the end of Mark Waid over at SJS Direct. If he wants to talk about, oh, I can't work because Donald Trump won the election, yeah, I ain't got no time for this clown. No, I understand, again, that there's more people out there who would love to have those opportunities, and having an opportunity to, again, work a dream job like this is where I will go out here and be working social media like I'm working it right now. I work social media, whether it be doing videos, whether it be doing live streams. I'm working to sell product. That's my goal as a writer. That's my goal as a publisher. My goal is to sell books. And when Mark Waid says, hey, I don't want to write superheroes because I don't believe in my fellow Americans' goodness. Well, I hate to break it to you, but when it comes to men, again, God doesn't see men as good like you say that they are, because he understands we are all born in sin. We all have a sin nature. And I hate to break it to Mark, but when it comes to your fellow Americans in a nation of, like your world, Mr. Superboy says, is founded on thieves, slaves, and opportunists, there's not much good in that world. And again, you have to go out here and make a living every day. I have to do that every day in a world that basically has rejected me for over 30 years, ever since I graduated high school. I have to go out here in a world where people aren't good, and I go out here and I write positive stories about black people. I write positive stories about a world full of different black people outside of the ghetto stories that I have seen in my life, because I've seen a larger picture of the world, and I've seen a world filled with black people who are not just living in the hood or in the streets as Pookie and Ray Ray, going out here doing jive hustles, or Sharkeisha basically being a baby mama. No, I've seen lots of great sisters out here. I've interacted with great people, and I want to tell their stories. That's what I want to do, is tell their stories out here in this world. And I go out here and I tell stories with those kind of heroes and those kind of people. And that's what I've been doing for the last, I'd say, about 30 years. I mean, that's the kind of stories I do with Isis, Esteem, and John Haynes, and books like Eternal Night, and books like The Thetas. I go out here and I can tell those kind of stories because I understand, even though our fellow Americans are born in sin, Jesus Christ went out here and paid the sin debt of mankind. And as he paid the sin debt of mankind, he made the greatest sacrifice, and he made the greatest sacrifice and showed us an example of good that transformed my life when I was 16 years old, and I basically felt like I had no hope. I mean, I was in high school, felt like I had no hope with all of the bullying I had as related to not having a girlfriend and people just showing me no respect. And I prayed to God to change my life. And after I prayed to God to change my life, and he did, what I did was go out here and wanted to give back to the world and give back positive things. And that's one of the things that inspired me to become a comic book writer, because the comic books were the hope that I had growing up as a kid, growing up next to the Long Island Railroad tracks on 167th Street in the South Bronx, growing up on welfare, growing up with Section 8. This was the hope that I had, again, as related to the things with comic books. They inspired me to be better, to do better, and at 9 years old, inspired me to want to write, because, again, comics were the way I learned how to read. But this business, again, sadly, doesn't go out here and want to work with a guy like me who has that passion for the craft and wants to learn about the craft. No, they'd rather continue to go out here and get upset about a bitch-made dude like Mark Waid, a bitch-made dude who basically, in his white privilege, doesn't appreciate anything that he has been given in this world, doesn't appreciate all the opportunities that he's been given in this life, sitting up here talking about, oh, he cannot go out here and work. Well, Mark, did you ever think about working with a black man or helping another black creator? Critical question I gotta ask Mark Waid, because while he sits there and talks about Donald Trump and talks about all the evil things Donald Trump did, this hypocrite never possibly ever wanted to work with a creator like myself in teaching a creator like myself the craft of writing or helping a creator like myself get in the door. And it just shows me how full of it that Mark Waid is, because he's sitting up here going out here talking about he wants to retire again as a man who's been out of work for 15 years, who has been putting in applications and resumes in every place from fast food to Target to basically every store out here and not getting a response. This is a guy who sits there and looks at Mark Waid and looks at him in his bitch ass behavior and sees him as someone who, again, doesn't appreciate his chance to have that American dream. An American dream I would have loved to have had, lived a life that I would have wanted to have, and would have taken those opportunities given to him and basically used them to be a role model for people as an example of how a professional is supposed to behave in this business, and would have been somebody who would have been looking to go out here and sell as many comics as possible, because I know how bad this industry is at this point. I know how bad this industry is at this point, and I would be one of those guys looking to go out here and sell comics and trying to get people to buy comics, getting people into the stores, going out here talking about comics, talking about the craft of comics in live streams. And I've done live streams talking about the craft of comic book writing, talking about the business overall. But sadly, when it comes to this business, this is what the late Jack Kirby has said: comics will break your heart. And sometimes I think it's a blessing I never got to work in this business, because I know how heartbreaking it is for a lot of people who read Mark Waid comics to see him acting like a bitch like this and throwing a tantrum like this, all because his candidate in the election didn't win, when in actuality, when it comes to life, there are winners and there are losers, and a man has to understand how to accept taking a loss, and accept taking a loss in this world, because that's just what life is all about. If you lose, you learn from it and you move on, and you have to move on because life is going to go on without Mark Waid in comics. So if he wants to go, all I have to say is don't let that door hit you in the ass, because there's people waiting in the wings to go out here and take your job and make it where people never really even care about the name Mark Waid, or even are concerned about the impact of the name Mark Waid on this medium of comics. Now, my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, is available on Lulu.com right now, and you can get that comic for the same price that people paid for it on the 2022 Kickstarter right now. And my first digital comic, Esteem No Good Deed, is available on Kindle for 99 cents. And if you want a paper copy, you can pick that up in the Esteem series book, Esteem Blast from the Past. And if you want to check out any of the other books on the SJS Direct universe, you can find those books in the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the Goth books in the Spinsterella trilogy, Spellbound, the legendary Mad Matilda and Spinsterella, and my sorority novel, The Thetas, and my vampire novel, Eternal Night, and my novel, A Recipe for Success. You can find all of these books that comprise the SJS Direct universe on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me take more comic book pros to the barbecue, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online booksellers everywhere today. Now available on Lulu. John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at Lulu.com today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.